So, Tom, I had a chance to speak to Denis Coderre earlier this afternoon. He was in studio, and very early in our discussion, I started to ask him about, his treatment by the Provincial Liberal Party.
Right.
And before I could finish the question, I got this.
I've been screwed by the party, yes.
You've been screwed by the party?
Totally. Because I give them everything, and they said at the end, Aaron, that, we had what we wanted, but we didn't take care to read it. And then no matter what, if we had another meeting about it, it would have been the same result. I had an agreement with Revenue Canada, and I'm going to take care of it. It's not the issue. I paid sometime even more than others, so don't worry about that. I'm going to do what I have to do. I don't bundleize it, and I'll take care of the rest.
So a typically long-winded answer to a fairly simple question there, but you heard what he said off the top. Tom, surprised?
Well, there is one part of what the Liberal Party had put together that's going to come back and haunt them when the vote comes up in a few weeks. They put in a Denis Coderre clause, I would call it. They came up with a system I've never seen before. So instead of having a ranked ballot where the person who finishes last is dropped off, and then the other ones, you look at who the second and third choices for votes would go to, they said only the top two finishers are in the final, so to speak.
Right.
That was to make sure that everybody else in the party could rally around and make sure that Denis Coderre didn't become the leader. Lo and behold, it's Pablo Rodriguez, who the people in Montreal, anyway, think would be a great leader for the Liberals, but they forgot about the fact that the province of Quebec is a little bit larger than the land surface that you find between Saint-Anne-de-Bellevue and St. Leonard. It's a pretty big place with very different views, and a lot of people who vote Conservative federally or NDP vote Liberal because it's a big tent. And right now, the people in the Liberal caucus in Montreal are turning the Liberal Party into the Liberal Party of Canada, the Ottawa Party within Quebec, and that's not a good recipe. So what's going to happen is the Denis Coderre rule could wind up foisting their plan to bring in Pablo Rodriguez. So back to Coderre, the mumbling answer you got about having a deal with Revenue Canada, the amounts just keep going up. Denis Coderre owes over $400,000 in taxes that he hasn't paid. It doesn't matter what kind of deal he's got. The party is simply saying, if you want to run for us, you got to prove that your taxes are up to date, and they're not. So it's not because he says he has a deal to eventually pay it when he finally sells his house, which is apparently the way he's hoping to be able to pay it. He couldn't run. He couldn't be the party leader. And to say that he got screwed, I think is a bit self-serving. I think that Denis knew what the rules were going to be, and that's why the party was saying, we're not going to have more meetings about this. You knew what the rules were, and you haven't been able to meet them. But getting back to my initial point with regard to the rules they did bring in to try to block Coderre, because do not kid yourself, on that, Coderre is right. The Liberal Party did not want him as leader, and the rules were put up in such a way, as I say, it's Pablo Rodriguez who will probably wind up being blocked by those very rules.
It's interesting. It also came up in the conversation, by the way, when I asked him, if he plans to endorse one of these, and he said he will, without saying who it would be. But apparently there's no love lost between him and Pablo Rodriguez either, because from what we discovered here, he backed him at the beginning and was kind of blindsided when Rodriguez decided to basically tell him thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, and if you remember Coderre's reaction, it's not your time, buddy, that sort of thing. No, he was clearly caught off guard by it. But again, this was at a time when the Liberals were in free fall in Ottawa, and, Rodriguez left that sinking ship, now was hoping to somehow continue his political career in Quebec City. And now he sees all of his old buddies getting reelected and going back into cabinet in Ottawa because Mark Carney won this miraculous election. And he's drumming the table right now. A lot of the people who work for him, they had been in Ottawa. A lot of them were given, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely fair. It's the rules. It's fine. But they were given, their severance and stuff as they left Ottawa. So they've been, I guess, a lot of them have been living off that. And lo and behold, they're now looking at this thing, and they're looking at the numbers. There's a fellow named Carl Blackburn, who's former M&A for Roberval, who I think has the inside track to win on the second round. The second round could go to him, or it could go to Charles Milliard. But there will be a coming together of the other votes. I don't see many of their supporters going over to Rodriguez, because the people from the Quebec Liberal Party, the last thing they want is for Quebecers to think that they're just the federal Liberal Party who set up a shop in Quebec, because they know that they'll get crushed by the Parti Québécois. Because I think the CAQ is a spent force. I'm absolutely convinced Legault's not running in the next election, and the CAQ itself is going to sink without a trace.
By the way, what do you make, just really quickly, and then I want to move on, this idea where Coderre is supporting Eric Duhem and Arthur Baskin, suggesting at the same time that the Liberals not run a candidate, which they said, thanks, but we'll do what we want.
Yeah, I mean, Denis is very good at getting into the news. I mean, the fact that you had him on your show is absolute proof of that, and he was out there not just saying that he was going to back Duhem, but he also had unsolicited advice for the provincial Liberals. Look, it's going to be a battle between the Parti Québécois and the Conservatives. I think that Duhem has a real fighting chance to win that riding, and with it, he gets access to the press room at the National Assembly, and he can hold daily press conferences. He'll get the occasional question period. So it's going to be very fun to watch. I don't know where Coderre comes off supporting a candidate from the Conservative Party after saying he wanted to head up the provincial Liberals, but I guess he's showing a lot of political flexibility.
Yeah, stranger things have happened. Okay, let me get to what happened in Ottawa. And I'm not up to date here, Tom, so help me out. Spending bill put forward by the Liberals, by Mark Carney, because all I heard today was Pierre Poilievre going to town about this. So what was in this?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the Liberals are just saying a simple truth, obviously, because Trudeau just left a couple of months ago. So, yes, their spending is still on track for an 8% increase year over year. But Carney says when he comes back in the fall, that was in the throne speech, he's going to, under Trudeau, the government has grown at 9% a year for 9 years. It's completely out of control because Trudeau had lots of skills as a politician. He was just an abysmal manager. He didn't understand a thing about public administration. His budgets were totally out of control, long before, by the way, the pandemic. So Carney's saying, I'm coming back in the fall. I'm going to have a full budget. We're going to get a handle on this thing. And he will. This will be very bitter medicine for the public service. I don't think there are a lot of senior civil servants. Like, you don't expect the deputy minister to be on the dock for 6 weeks this summer. They're all going to be hunkering down, trying to find where they can cut without affecting services to the public. And Carney says he wants to accomplish big things. He's not going to be held back by this. Poilievre's getting in easy rounds, saying, oh, this is terrible, but he knows darn well that this is just the Trudeau legacy of bad public administration.
I want to touch on one other thing, and it's funny because we talked about this the other day, the new provisions in Bill 96 affecting signage and labeling and whatever else, where Jean-François Roberge says, you know what, I've heard everyone, I've heard all the complaints and the Retail Council of Quebec, etc., but no, I'm not going to give anyone some extra time. I don't understand this, Tom, because there is nobody saying this is a good thing. There's also nobody saying this does anything to protect or promote the French language. So what is this about?
That's most, what you just said at the end is the most important thing. And this is interesting because they keep getting slapped in the face when they go to the courts. The courts on the cuts to McGill and Concordia, Superior Court went through the whole thing, went through the litany of political arguments from the Quebec government, looked at the Quebec government's lawyers and the Attorney General's folks and said, you have zero evidence of what you're saying, that the French language is in danger because of McGill, and you got to start attacking McGill and Concordia. So when this stuff meets the light of day of an actual court hearing, it always gets thrown out. So you have to ask yourself, is that part of the strategy? You come up with something that you know darn well the courts are going to throw out, and then you get to say, oh, this is so unfair. The courts are ganging up on us. We don't get to decide how to protect Quebec. The courts are telling us how to do it. It's the exact same thing that's about to happen on Bill 40, which was an absolutely patently, transparently illegal attempt by the Quebec government to deprive the English-speaking community of a hard and fast constitutional right to control and manage its school boards. Full stop. It's done. The jurisprudence has been around for decades now, and it's hard-baked. Doesn't matter. Legault wanted to remove those school boards. The Quebec Court of Appeal, it just raised its eyebrow and said, what are you talking about? You can't do this. And so Legault has just announced today he's taking that one. We just heard a clip from Joe Ortona. Yeah. We're taking that one to the Supreme Court. Well, good luck. And what's going to happen is soon, the same way day follows night, Supreme Court's going to throw some light on this thing and say, you've got to be kidding. You know this is illegal. Why are you even wasting our time? They actually have to decide to hear it. And in my dreams, I imagine the Supreme Court saying, no, we're not even going to hear this. We'll just let the Quebec Court of Appeal decision stand because it's that good and that strong. But I think they'll give this thing a hearing because 21, which is the law that takes away rights of religious minorities, Bill 96, that takes away constitutional rights of the English-speaking community to equality of English and French before the courts. That's going to the Supreme Court. So all of this stuff is heading to the Supreme Court. With a little bit of luck, they'll build a big enough bonfire, and Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon will get to dance around it because he'll say, you see, we're not allowed to do whatever we want against minorities because The Supreme Court believes minorities have rights, and of course we know that we shouldn't have any of that here in Quebec.
Ah, yes, and it never ends, does it? All right, Tom Mulcair. Tom, have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
You too. All the best.
Take good care.